So we're now talking about the Americas, both North America and South America, Silvia. And obviously when we start to look at South America, Brazil is the dominant economy in the region, but it's facing tough times. So what's been the impact on the banks in our ranking?
The economic recession definitely has taken its toll on banks, and on an aggregate level, Brazilian banks have seen the Tier 1 capital shrinking by almost 30%, which is quite a lot.
Well, that really is significant. Yeah.
It is quite a lot. They still remain, however, the largest banks by the same measure by Tier 1 capital in the whole of the Latin American and Caribbean region, being led by Itaú Unibanco.
Okay, and I mean, let's face it, I mean, the Brazilian banks are still strong, and they took precautionary measures before we got into the recession. So,
That's correct.
I mean, that shows you how bad the crisis is, even though the banks are actually taking precautionary measures. Okay, so let's move on from Brazil to another country that has economic troubles, which is Venezuela. But actually, we've seen Venezuelan banks do quite well in the ranking, haven't we? What's the story there?
So the Venezuelan story has become increasingly hard to read, not least because of a multiple system of official exchange rates that have massive differences among them. The one that we use in our research is the one that would have 6.28 bolivars to buy a dollar,
rate, yeah.
and that is the one that the IMF uses because it's used for the key imports.
All right, so
but then there is another one.
Makes the banks look much better.
It does, because let me give you a figure to explain how big this difference is. So 6.28 against another official rate, which has the bolivar at exchanging at over $400. Then there is the black market one as 1,000. So we decided to keep the Venezuelan banks in our regional ranking, of course. But we decided to remove them from our highest movers list, which highlights the banks that have expanded their Tier 1 capital the most. And this also lets us present other interesting stories coming from Latin America, such as, for example, the Dominican Republic.
Okay, so what's the link there with the Dominican Republic?
So the Dominican Republic, usually Caribbean banks don't quite make it into our top names in our regional ranking. But the Dominican Republic has definitely had very good economic performances over the past few years, set to grow yet again at 7% this year by forecast from the central bank. And we have Banco Popular Dominicano, which sits in third place in the highest movers list, and with the Tier 1 capital that has expanded by almost 19%.
How much is that a currency impact then?
In the Dominican Republic? Yeah. Well, there isn't an issue with the currency there, so it's a very clear,
so this
open,
is based
transparent
on genuine
market.
Economic growth.
It is a very clear, transparent market that has been growing at very good rates, where the government has really taken steps to work along the private sector and the banking sector to support growth.
Okay. Let's now turn to North America and obviously the United States. So the United States is growing, perhaps not quite as fast as everybody would like. Obviously, we put the interest rate rises very largely on hold. What sort of impact is that having on the US banks?
So we've seen that during the 2015 financial year, on an aggregate level, again, US banks have grown their Tier 1 capital by about 5%, which is good news.
Yeah, so it's faster than economic growth, that's for sure.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, that's right. So the list of the largest North American banks is still very much dominated by US names, and once again by JP Morgan. Now, something interesting is that banks seem to be warming up again to mortgages. And JP Morgan itself had expanded its mortgage lending by a figure, and let me check the data I have here, of about 19%.
Okay, so this looks good for US banks. And obviously you have a lot of smaller US banks in the ranking, a large number in the ranking. Are they doing as well as the big banks?
Yes, so I have another interesting fact for you there, Brian, as well. So we have the smaller banks, which we would define as, for example, being placed from 15th position down in our country ranking. Having switched a lot of them from reporting according to Basel I rules to Basel III.
Right.
And quite a few of them actually still managed to report an expansion in Tier 1 capital, which is quite impressive.
Which is the opposite of what you would expect, basically.
Exactly, because Basel III rules are tougher than the previous.
Okay.
The two previous versions, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Silvia, for the update on both North and South America.
Thank you.